Hey there, and welcome back to the Total Potential Podcast. It's Cole. I'm so excited today to be joined by Benjamin Lee. He's such a dynamic individual. He started his career in pharmaceutical sales and then took a leap of faith and moved with his wife to Texas and has really devoted his life to preaching. So, Benjamin has had a chance to preach in countries around the world, in states across this country. He has published books and Bible workbooks and so many just really incredible things. He is a coach and has his own podcast, the I Can Do podcast. And I just can't wait to dive into our topic today that I think will touch a lot of parents' hearts. So let's go ahead and welcome Benjamin to the podcast. Benjamin, thanks so much for joining me today.
You are welcome, Cole. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. I'm real, like almost anxious to get to our topic today, but I'm gonna exercise a little bit of patience
Yeah,
and just give us a little bit of a picture of who is Benjamin and what are some of the, formative events that have led you to the work that you're doing now.
yeah, absolutely. Faith, family, fitness, food. Those are really four big pillars in my life. I could really talk about each one of those for hours probably, but Benjamin is really blessed, and I'm thankful for the things that God has given me. So, just a little bit about myself. I've been married for 19 years, and I have an 11-year-old son and a dog. For one named Teddy. My son's name is Joshua, and it's been going really well, family wise, career wise. I started with Pfizer Pharmaceuticals in 2001. Went to the University of Illinois and majored in kinesiology. So I've always been interested in fitness and health. My mom was a massage therapist for a number of years, along with one of my aunts as well. So I think that really steered me towards fitness and health as well. During that time, Cole, it's interesting, people that you meet in certain moments in life where you can look back, and it's one of those pivotal moments. When I started working with Pfizer in 2001, there was a preacher there, and he really took me under his wing, and I would have lunch with him numerous times. I'd bring him lunch and we talk, and I just had so many questions about the scriptures and things like that. But that really set me on the path of getting into preaching. That wouldn't be for 8 more years in
Mhm.
2009. There were some other pivotal moments and key people as well. My grandfather was a preacher when I was growing up, and it's funny. I found this. I've kept this old journal that I wrote back in my English class. I think in 1995, I was a junior in high school,
Awesome.
and you had to make a list of 25 things you want to do. One of those 25, I wrote down, I want to preach the gospel in far places, which is really crazy because I've been blessed. I've been able to do that. Went to Africa in 2014, and I preached in Mexico and across the US. So it's just interesting looking back how some of those things were planted early. And then now I've been preaching for 15 years. But that preacher in Rockford, Illinois, really inspired me and helped me a lot with just a lot of understanding. I also had a physician who I called on. He was an internal med physician. I feel bad. I can't remember his name, but this may have been in like '06 or '07. He gave me the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad
Mhm.
by Robert Kiyosaki. And my wife and I, we actually bought, they had this a board game called Cash Flow. So we bought that game, and I read the book. So what was interesting about the book, The Rich Dad, would surround himself with people who were smarter than him, right? He had like a board of directors. The Poor Dad didn't have that as much, but that actually played a big role when I went into a preacher training program in 2009. There was a program in Beaumont, Texas, and two preachers there with probably about 60 years of experience. And I said, well, they know a lot more than I do. So, but that idea from that book really resonated with me with that. So I got into preaching in 2009 after 8 years working with Pfizer. I felt like there was something bigger that I could do, something that would have even a greater impact. And so Pfizer, though, certainly helped me out with being able to talk in front of people.
Mm.
And, if you can talk to doctors, I feel like
Yes.
you can talk to pretty much anybody. So I've been doing that for the past 15 years, and I got into podcasting in 2019. That was really out of fear. How was it going to work out? We're going to talk about worry. There was
Yeah.
certainly worry that held me back. I'd bought a microphone and it sat in my closet for a year, and I just didn't do anything with it. And I was just too much in my head, I believe. But I eventually just said, let's give it a shot. So I've been podcasting now for the last 5 years. So that's a little bit
Cool.
of this journey of where I am today.
Yeah, so cool. Um, I love that you can even pinpoint, like a book that has this, right? Because I think for a lot of people, they can take in ideas or hear somebody on a podcast, or you know what I mean, but it kind of feels far away. And I
Hmm.
think you do have to kind of have a level of like, I don't know, what is that showing me? Where might that take me? What,
Hmm.
right? To
Oh
to
yeah,
really have a different experience by letting those things into your life. So it's so cool that you can pinpoint some of them. And so
yeah.
you tapped into a little bit today of like what our main topic is. And, I'd just like to give this a little bit of context from the listener's perspective, right? Because it's like we're parents of young families. And I mean, even before a baby's born, right? You're like, is everything going okay during the pregnancy? Like it just parenting. I mean, I think we're kind of wired for worrying anyway, and the way our culture is set up and our influences and whatnot definitely lean us into a lot of that. But parenting, I just think, is a very unique lens through which worry can get big fast,
Yep.
and it can almost feel like it is spiraling past what we can control and change. And so I'm just so thankful to even be able to have a conversation that can shift, what might be possible or how we might change the belief around it, or, all these things that are present if we just are willing to put a little bit of attention on the discomfort of it. So I'm just so glad that you have the courage to talk about a topic that, I think basically every person deals with. And then you put that in the context of parenting and it's more. So what comes up for you in this topic as like what you see, what you experience?
Yeah, this is you're exactly right, Cole. I really started diving into this subject a lot more last year. It was more personal. It wasn't as much with family issues per se, but there definitely has been a lot of worry, in times past with it. I feel like I'm still on a journey with it, but last year I had to write a manuscript for this college that I was going to speak at, and I actually did the presentation this past February.
Oh,
But it
awesome.
had to be completed by, I believe, like August 15th last year. So this month is a little weird. It's not weird, but I'm just thinking about everything that happened last year. I did not handle it the right way. I think there are different kinds of worry as well. I believe I was consumed with egotistical worry. I was worried about how are people going to receive this 16-page or 15-page manuscript. Is it going to be any good? What might people actually think about me or say about me afterwards? Is it going to be on the same level or par compared with the other speakers who are going to be there? What I learned after I got done with it was, man, I feel like I'm out of control. And
Mm.
it just consumed so much of my time. Fast forward to February, I gave the presentation and then it's all done. So it's in a book if somebody wants to read it, but I didn't get fired. My wife is still with me. My son still loves me. I actually got a couple more speaking engagements that week just because I had this one opportunity. So there were other good things that came from it, but I had allowed myself to become consumed with worry. It really took away a lot of the joy of the process. It added stress that I did not need, that I believe was, manifested or showed up in different areas, like with weight gain and poor sleep, and just not a good overall attitude.
Mm.
So that really woke me up with I need to do something different. So the first book I'm always going to encourage people to read is the Bible, and Jesus has a lot to say about worry. Obviously, what's interesting, I have another book, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. I've done a sermon by that title. It's actually by Dale Carnegie, who wrote the book in the early 1900s.
Mm.
And so it's interesting, even looking at different writers, whether it's Dale Carnegie, David Seabury. He was a psychologist in the 20th century. I have a number of his books, which I highly recommend. And I can't recommend maybe everything in a book, but it's like eating fish.
Yeah.
The meat, spit out the bones, right? But I started just researching more, Cole, because I knew, no, this is a problem that I really need to dive into. And it's I've certainly have seen it as well within family dynamics, whether with my wife or with my son, other family members as well, which we can dive into. But that really was the genesis of me just doing a deep dive. So for the past I guess year or close to a year now, I really just wanted to shine the light on worry, eliminating worry, understanding it, or even when I do get it, because all of us are going to have some kind of care at some point in time, or worry or anxiety. But how do we navigate it? And then how can we quickly release it, so to
Mm.
speak?
Okay, so this is awesome. Give us a little bit more insight. You said there's a few types of worry.
hmm
What would you
Yeah.
say are some of like the buckets?
Well, so I like what David Seabury mentioned, where he talked about egotistical worry. I think that's a big part of it. And I think underneath that is pride.
Mm,
There's a passage in First Peter chapter 5, verses 6 and 7. For those who want to read it, I love the passage in verse 7 where it says, casting all your cares to him, talking about God, because he cares for you. So the Bible tells us what to do with our cares, but it's interesting because the verse right before it is dealing with humility. So I
mm,
think some worry is actually rooted in pride or can be egotistical in nature. I was worried about what everybody else from a professional standpoint was thinking. And that can happen even like with podcasting and things like that. That can
sure.
happen with parenting. Well, this parent, their children are engaged in 3 or 4 sports. My son's not doing any sports. So now what does that mean for me as a father?
Yeah.
When the reality is they're probably not even thinking about me. So worry can fall into that category as well. I would say some other kinds of worry. I think a lot of worry is often self-induced, where I have a motto: we can live and learn, or we can learn and live.
Mm,
And a lot of the worry that we have may be because we're repeating maybe the same mistakes over and over again.
mm,
So just understanding the different kinds or buckets, maybe from a professional standpoint, family standpoint, spiritual standpoint, that's a really big one as well, which the scriptures talk a lot about. That will allow you to really see, okay, where exactly is this worry coming from? What exactly do I need to address? For some, it could just be a big part of worry today with the economy is just dealing with money.
mm.
So now, as we start thinking about money, even from a family standpoint, now we can start taking some action steps. Okay, this is really what I'm worried about. It's an interesting thing to do, Cole. If people can name their worries, people are often they feel anxious, and I've felt that way before, right? But if you can really pinpoint, why do I feel this way? And I know you understand this with breath work and slowing down, and just giving yourself margin so you can actually identify it. That will help to really process, okay, this is exactly what I'm worried about. And then once you can figure that out and figure out which silo you need to address, then you can kind of go from there.
Yeah. And I think, you know, one thing that stands out as you describe some of the different buckets that worry can end up in is two things that you didn't specifically say, but I kind of heard. And I want to make sure that I'm hearing this correctly before we keep going. One being something to the effect of, I'm not enough. Something
Mm.
else, someone's going to think something negative about me because I'm not enough. Or, you know what I mean? Like this kind
Mhm.
of, it has lots of different ways that we experience it and express it, but it kind of comes down to like, am I going to be good enough by someone else's standards when I do that? And then the other part of like that I have to keep it and I have to control it. And
Mm, mhm,
that
mhm.
there's not, you know, that maybe even if I have a strong faith, it's hard for me to give my life, my well-being, my family, my finances, my all of that to a higher power And I
Mhm.
think that can feel really distant for a lot of people. But does that land as kind of the
Yeah, yeah, this idea of I'm not enough. I was kind of thinking about that example that I shared with you last year. That's interesting too, because the reality is, as I look back at that, most of the worry, if not all of it, was self-induced.
hmm,
It didn't come from anybody else.
sure.
Number one, the college invited me to speak, so
They
they
wanted
already
you there.
right, they already had confidence in me, right? Number two, it didn't conflict with anything else, with morals or my work or family. My wife was supportive, and so yeah, the I think the issue was more maybe not I'm not enough, but maybe more of self sabotage of if I would have planned more, accurately or better. The second thought that you mentioned, I think, is one of the biggest challenges. Um, talking about God and letting, trusting in him and letting go of the reins, so to speak. And I was just talking to someone about this, and we want to hold on so much to control.
Mm,
And a great exercise to do, I was listening to a book by an author by the name of Gay Hendricks. He's written a book, The Big Leap, and he has another follow up book which came out in 2021. So I just listened to that via Audible. And one of the exercises that he talks about is just getting two folders and writing down what you actually have control of and put it in the folder that you actually have control of, and then what you don't have control of. And it will be shocking, if we do that exercise. There's a lot of things that we do have control of, but there's also a lot of things I don't have any control of. So, it's just like with the manuscript and this paper that I wrote. At the end of the day, I don't even know who's read it.
hmm,
Actually, I haven't gotten any feedback from it. So that could be a good thing or a bad thing. But
totally.
I don't. I know people bought the book, but what I do know is, well, I can enjoy this. I could have enjoyed the process more. I could control my schedule, was that where I wasn't waiting like to the last minute to get all this stuff done. So the things that we can control, we need to really capitalize on those. But there are many elements of life that we have zero control over, just zero. So, for me, I have a heart condition. I have an enlarged heart. I've had a blood clot in 2014 when I was working out on my right coronary artery. I have an aneurysm just sitting there on my heart. Well, I've done as much as I can. I got a defibrillator. I'm trying to stay healthy. I work out, but I don't have as much control as I think I do.
Sure.
So I can be consumed by it, or I can say I'm going to let it go and leave it in the hands of God.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a super hard thing to do and one of the most valuable, right? Because I think um something we kind of want to avoid by controlling what maybe we don't even have control over is pain or suffering or the pain and suffering of people we love and care about. And I mean, that stuff is never fun to go through. I'm not saying like, woohoo, it's going to be a party when all that comes your way. And some of the most beautiful gifts of life come from going through discomfort and pain and suffering. And so, we have this, "Ooh, like keep that at bay. I don't want that. I don't want that," which number one, like from um like a subconscious perspective, my own belief is like when we resist it really heavily, we actually kind of like pull it to us. That, when we create that friction, it's like almost like a gravitational pull that grabs it. Um, but then also like all of the joy that could be on the other side of that, or all the life's lessons or the purpose that could be revealed or the people that come into your life, right? It's like we also have no control over that. And it's beautiful. It's so interesting that we spend so much time resisting and in the worry.
Yeah, and you're right. And all of us, I'm sure, have been guilty of that. I heard a quote. I can't remember who said it, Cole, but I love it. Suffering does not make you unique.
Hmm.
How you respond to it is what makes you unique. I love that because suffering is going to come in all of our lives. It's inevitable. It's going to happen in some shape or form. Some may be bigger than others. But one thought I think is important, and I'm thinking about a woman that I know, a sister in Christ. She died back in February of cancer. She was diagnosed 5 years earlier. She certainly wasn't happy that she got this diagnosis. It was extremely difficult. Her husband is a preacher, so some might say, "Well, man, they're doing great things. They're helping other
Mhm.
people. Why is this happening?" But she actually became a great example for so many people because I think the diagnosis was maybe 6 months to a year, and she was blessed with 5 additional years. And so, whether, I go on Facebook or talk to her husband at lunch, just the memories that were gained in the life with family that they were able to share during those 5 years was such an amazing thing. Now, obviously, she wanted more time, and all of us would have loved for that to happen as well. But she had to make a choice, and I think this is important for all of us, especially with something like that. They did as much as they could, I believe. They went to MD Anderson. The things that they could do that were tangible, they did,
Mhm.
and I believe God was working as well. But if she only focused on, well, look at where I am, she would have missed out on 5 more years with her children,
Mm.
and the influence and the podcast that she was on, and the impact that she had, to the point where when I went to her funeral, it's overflowing with people. There's no
Yeah.
room to sit. And it was just an amazing example. Again, it's not something that we wish for or anything like that. But when those moments do come, how we handle that will be really, I think, the key factor. And I think that's really a distinction between like worry and concern. I'm
Mm.
not saying when I say that we shouldn't worry that we're never going to have any concerns.
Sure.
It's just a part of life that we are going to have concerns. But the distinction between worry and concern is how we handle the situation. So we can become consumed with worry. It can paralyze a person, or we can face it head on. And I think what we're talking about here is so important, where one of the most important things for all of us where we can keep worry at bay and really overcome it is facing reality.
Mm.
When we face reality, okay, Ben, you have a heart condition. As much as I want this to go away, it ain't going away. I went to 3 specialists, pretty sure I have it. I've had the cardiac MRIs, the echoes, the EKGs, they're all saying the same thing, but
Mhm.
I really want it to go away. I can deny it, and as you were saying, I can resist it, but it's just gonna make everything that much more challenging. And even the Apostle Paul in 2 Corinthians 12, he prayed 3 times to the Lord. He had some ailment. I don't know what it was, but it's described as a thorn in the flesh.
Mm.
And he prayed, take it away. That's a good prayer for all of us, right? But the Lord said, my grace is sufficient.
Mm.
And so the way that he responded, he could have just said, okay, well, I quit. But he didn't. He kept on going, and he relied upon the strength of the Lord.
Yeah, that's incredible. What a testament. How do you encourage, because I think for a lot of people, worrying is kind of happening so frequently and from such a subconscious level that it can almost be hard to pinpoint, like, how do I even know I'm worried about something? How do you help people kind of navigate into even recognizing what they're worried about, or when the worries arise or are triggered? What does that look like?
That's a great question, actually. Well, I know for me, I can kind of feel when I'm going down this path, or maybe we can navigate. I don't know an exact answer for that. I have to think about that a little bit more. But I think sometimes there can be some telltale signs when we, maybe become stagnant,
Mm.
or everything just feels like it's going more slowly. Certain things are not getting done. Our thoughts are often consumed on one thing. Sometimes worry can be like a nudge of, you need to address this. So when we do find ourselves consumed or thinking about something in particular, maybe it is with our spouse or something going on with our children, that could be like a warning sign of, why don't you slow down and see if you need to address this?
Mm,
So that may be something that I would try to walk someone through. How do you know if you're even worried? I think for a lot of people, they know, um, just based upon habits and personalities and things like that. But I guess trying to slow down and have enough space. So how could you identify that? Um, Make sure that you have some kind of time for self-reflection would be
mhm,
important.
yeah.
There's a great book called Margin that I read a number of years ago when I was in pharmaceutical sales. And margin is just the idea of just having enough space where you're
Mm,
not always right up on the line. So give yourself some margin, maybe in the morning, maybe it's some kind of routine. I know you have your routine, I have mine, but some quiet time,
mm,
uh, time to actually allow thoughts to settle in our minds. If we find ourselves always wanting to, maybe block out certain things that are happening, maybe that's a sign
mm,
of, "Oh, maybe I'm just trying to delay the inevitable."
mm.
Sometimes we know that there are certain things that we need to get done, and we do everything else except that particular thing. Maybe there's something there, which needs to be addressed.
Yeah. I have just enough Irish in me that my telltale, this isn't so much like worry, lingering worry, but worry like acute is I'll turn bright red. And I used to really dislike that feature of my skin tone. But it's helpful now because 'cause I'm like, "Oh, isn't that interesting? Like, what am I even worried about under that? Is it some how some might perceive me or whatever?" It's kinda interesting to think about. There's almost like those tells on acute worry of like, "Oh gosh, in the moment, I'm noticing something. Maybe it's sweaty palms or my heart races or whatever," right? And then, yeah, like what the quieter worries that maybe are just kinda lingering in the background, and maybe it is the thing that we're actually just avoiding even thinking about. I mean, that's, you know, an interesting dynamic of some of the aspects of worry. I love that.
Yeah, yeah, it could be things sometimes that we're trying to avoid, or it could just be something that's, have you ever had something that's just constantly on your mind?
Yes.
And it's not in a positive way. It's not in a way that's driving you to maybe be more productive or to feel relaxed or content, but it's like some kind of angst.
Yeah.
It's some kind of rushing. It's something where you feel unsettled, and that's where we need to say, I wonder why I'm feeling this way. And that's why I say when I've talked to people before and I ask, what are you actually worried about? Not, figuring out what exactly that is. And it's just a great question to ask yourself or whoever is listening. Why am I worried? So you said, with your Irish background, you get a little flustered and red. Well, when you start feeling that way, okay, why am I feeling this way? Am I rushed? Did I wake up late? Am I worried? Did I have an argument with my husband the night before? Is there something I need to share with my children? So just getting curious and asking questions of why do I feel this way? So we can get certain things. Sometimes it can just be anticipation,
Hmm.
and maybe it's just something that some big event that's coming up. But I would just say get curious, ask questions for yourself, and it may be interesting to see what you find out.
Yeah. Other ways that you recommend in terms of like kind of once you know what it is you're worried about or can start to investigate what it is you're worried about, what comes up for you and how we start to shift out of it and kind of start to move it out of our system?
hmm Well, I have a number of thoughts with that. Number one, stay in today.
Mm,
So number one, stay in today. I heard, and I don't know if this quote is accurate or the number, I'd have to go and research it, but 90% of our thoughts or worries are from the past.
mm,
If that's true, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. So, how do we process, how do we navigate this? Number one, stay in today. Dale Carnegie, in his book, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, said, stay in airtight compartments. So, yesterday is gone. Tomorrow is not even here, so stay in today. Jesus says the same thing in the Sermon on the Mount, right? Do not worry about tomorrow. You have enough problems for today. Give us this day, and the Lord and teaching how to pray. Give us this day our daily bread. So not yesterday's crusty bread and not tomorrow, but just stay in today. And that actually is a very challenging thing to do. Now, when I say stay in today, I don't mean that we don't think about tomorrow. I don't mean that we don't plan for tomorrow. We need to do that. We've planned for this podcast. You sent out
Sure. Yeah.
Zoom link. We put it on the calendar. So I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is there's only so much that we can do, and there is a lot for us to do today. So that would be my first thought, stay in today. Number two, I love what there's a book called The Stress Prescription, if I'm remembering correctly. And I like what the author said, catch and release.
Hmm.
Catch and release. Her idea is when you find certain thoughts running through your mind, catch them, and then be willing to release them. We see like the signs at lakes or things like that with fishing, right? Catch and release. So we understand that when it comes to going fishing. Well, the same thing is true even from a biblical standpoint, catch and release. So we can control where our thoughts go. We can control what we put into our head. So social media, television, news, certain movies, certain music, we can control a great portion. Now, there are times where certain things just pop into your head.
Sure.
Somebody says something, but we get to decide what are we going to do with those thoughts. And so the idea is catch and then release those thoughts. So what does that mean to release? One way is to pray.
Mhm.
Um, and those thoughts into the Lord. Another way is just to examine those thoughts and say, "No, I don't think this is really true. I don't think we sometimes question enough some of the thoughts that are popping into our head. Is that actually true? Do I
Mhm.
actually need to worry about this? I don't think I actually need to even be thinking about this. This isn't even worth my time. So stay in today, catch and release. That'd be another option. Number three, learn and live.
Mhm.
Um, learn from mistakes. So we all know, whether it's money or health, if you eat certain foods, you're going to feel a negative way. If you're procrastinating for something, that automatically adds a lot of worry and
Mm.
tension, fear. So learn and live. Don't keep living and learning and going down the same path that is going to produce nothing but fear, worry, and anxiety and things like that. So stay in today, catch and release, learn and live. I've already mentioned another one, face your reality.
Mm. Yeah.
Face your reality. I think there are two big fears for the future for most people, and that's money and death.
Mm.
But when we can start wrapping our minds around both of those, am I going to have enough money? The reality of death, how we face that is going to go a long way. So we have to be willing to face our reality. I would say also, and I know I just said a moment ago, maybe we're too busy and we're not thinking about our thoughts. But I do think, Cole, if we do stay busy, that's a way to eliminate a lot of worry. Sometimes we just may have so much time, or we stay idle, or we're not engaged in behavior that's going to, help us out with joy and gratitude and things that are actually going to bring something good. So staying busy is actually a good thing. In the book by Dale Carnegie, that was one of the prescriptions for individuals, if I'm remembering correctly, who came back from the First and Second War to
Mm.
stay busy because their minds were so consumed with everything they went through, and naturally so. So I'm not saying that we ignore what's happening, but what I am saying is there's a lot that can be done because worry often has a way of just causing us to stop everything, just like a slow
Yeah. Yeah. It can be very anchoring in
Yes.
some ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's really something to be said about that aspect of take action. Um, and do keep the days moving, and like that's one way to take action so that you're not just sitting in the worry. Sometimes it's that you got to take action right on the thing you're worried about, right? It's like, gosh, if I'm gonna sit and perseverate about giving a speech. This just happened to me last week, and it was like the teeniest, tiniest little blip. It caught so much of my attention, and I kept thinking, like, I can't wait to actually just do this. I can't wait until it's right here, right now, so I can, in real time, recognize I have nothing to worry about. Everything is okay right here. And I do think that sometimes we just have to do the thing that, and I'm not saying we got to jump out of planes or do, I mean, I'm not saying we got to go crazy. I mean, if that's a way for you to, shift your relationship to fear, maybe. But
Mhm.
there's lots of activities, lots of things we do in our life that cause tons of worry. And it's, for a lot of us, that will be the limiting step to ever doing them.
Yes, that's
Right?
exactly.
Whereas it's like, well, maybe you don't have to go all the way. Maybe you do something to get your toes wet on the thing that you're worried about. But
Yes.
start taking action toward that thing. I just love that as a
Mhm.
strategy to almost like teach the system. Everything is okay. I am okay.
Yes. Yeah, I like that too. That the idea of teaching the system. Michael Phelps, when he was swimming in the Olympics, his coach would often tell him during or right before a meet, put in the game tape, right?
Mhm.
And he was training his system of all the practice and things like that. So we can start looking at some of these examples of worry as okay, well, this is another opportunity for me to put into practice some of the action steps or some of the game plans that we have been accumulating throughout the year. So I know you're into yoga and stretching and getting into your body, which I think is so important. And exercise is such a great way to process the worry and the stress and to navigate it in a healthy way. In fact, you probably will get a lot of answers when you do work out. I get a
Mm,
lot. I have a lot of creativity, and a lot of the things that maybe we're worried about, maybe that answer will pop up in our minds when we are doing something different. So, um, exercise is a great antidepressant, and
mm,
there is something about, you know what, I'm just going to turn this off, put certain worries in different compartments and say, okay, I'm going to handle this worry later on. And now I'm just going to focus on this. And so doing that, getting into your body, taking action. I like John Maxwell in his book, The 15 Laws of Invaluable Growth. He talked about, he heard from someone else. I can't remember the guy's name, but he went to some seminar and the guy would say every morning, when you wake up 50 to 100 times, say, do it now.
mm.
And now, do it now, do it now, do it now. There's something to that, especially when it comes to worry. So let's say if we're worried about having a conversation with our spouse about something. Well, we can sit on that for 4 months and worry about, I wonder what they're going to say. Or we can say, hey, listen, can we make some time later on tonight or this week to talk about this? And many of the times, the things that we worry about, when we actually take action on them, it's like, oh, you're not upset. And they're like, why would I be upset about that? We get in our own way and we tell ourselves these stories. And I'm noticing another connection, Cole. The book, the Big Leap, the author talks about upper limits. Upper limiting is the idea of, experiencing a lot of joy or happiness and gratitude, but it almost gets to a point where things are working out so well, it's almost like, well, wait a second, this is too much. Or like what you said, I'm not enough. I don't deserve to feel this good.
Mm,
And then he said the first thing to see if you are upper limiting is worry.
hmm.
How much are you worrying? Because that worrying, have you ever, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, Cole. Have you ever had like just like a great moment or a great day, or, things are just working out just like exactly how you want them. And then you find yourself complaining about something,
Hmm.
or you get in an argument with someone and you're like, where did this come from? Like, everything was great. Why am I in an argument now? Has that ever happened to
For sure.
you?
For sure. The other way. I've seen that done a lot around me, and I'm super cognizant of not doing this myself because it does just become so obvious to me in other relationships. But there are a lot of people I know who are just everything is shiny and bright, and they'll out loud say something to the effect of like, "When's the other shoe gonna drop?"
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
That's like
and I
upper
love
limit.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the upper limit. It's so interesting, right? That well, things are too good now. But I mean, I don't know, this is my own belie like, if we wanna see abundance, then let's create the space to see abundance, like, who knows how much love and joy and peace and serenity and bliss and all of these wonderful things we could experience, and I actually think there are for some people, like, even the anticipation of that as a potential experience is like, "Whoa." Like,
Mhm.
at least the discomfort or the worry or the upset, that's something I at least know how to navigate, and I know how to kinda be with it and ride it out. But that other version, I have no idea what's over there,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah, it's a great observation, and it's something I think we need to get more comfortable experiencing for sure. A lot of times we're worried about things that are never going to happen. We're worried about what other people are thinking about. Um, and from a biblical standpoint, with what I teach and preach, if we're worried about what God has to say, that automatically eliminates so much worry about
Mm,
what other people have to say. I'm not saying that we're not concerned about our reputation or, hey, I'm just going to live however, I don't care what you have to say. That's not what I mean by that. But we can become such people pleasers. And people pleasing often leads to a lot of worry because we're living for someone else per se, or we're just trying to make sure that we're measuring up, and that's just not going to happen. And so yeah, there is a different kind of way to live where we don't have to be consumed with fear and doubt and worry and just feeling anxious all the time. But we do have to give ourselves that space to say, oh, this is like a new normal
mm,
where I don't have to be rushed. I don't have to yell at my kids. I don't always have to have everything exactly perfect. The house doesn't always have to be cleaned according to someone's, expectations or something like that. Or, so it's just trying to really look at things in the right lens, in the right way. And yeah, it definitely makes life much easier.
yeah.
And we don't have to. And I remember I texted a friend. He was worried about something, and I texted him the passage from Matthew chapter 6, verses 24 through 34, where Jesus talks about worry, which is interesting because it's the biggest part of his sermon.
Mm.
On the Sermon on the Mount, that's interesting. The biggest part is on worry. But my friend texted me back and he said, "Can it really be that easy?" And that's something that I think we struggle with. Can it actually be this easy? Our lives don't have to be filled with chaos. Certainly, we need to expect the unexpected. And there's another action item that we can do. When
Mm.
you understand that anything can happen, it automatically puts down this guard of how come things didn't go exactly the way I wanted them to go. My son's friend just called via the iPad or FaceTime. Uh, Now you're gonna have to edit that out. But when we can expect the unexpected and understand that, oh, my schedule's not gonna be probably absolutely perfect the way that I want it to be, then that automatically eliminates a lot of the frustration and worry and things like that.
Yeah. Because you have a unique perspective on this as a preacher, I'd be really interested to just tap into a little bit. You know, I know a lot of people who have a faith or were raised in church or kind of have some level of access to looking to a higher, greater power. Um, but I think as far as like turning that into the way that you live or something that you feel like you can access
Mm,
in a moment, any moment, I think for some people starts to feel far away. Like maybe it's they they go to church on Sunday because that's the one time where it's like, I know I'm gonna feel connected, or I know I'm gonna hear the message, or whatever it might be. How do people start to close some of those gaps where it does feel like there's more access and more possibility just in the day-to-day life to feel like you have that connection where you can make it that easy, to use your friend's words?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say a couple of things. My wife has around her house some sticky notes that say saturate.
Mm,
So saturate is a reminder for her to saturate her mind with God's word. So as
mm,
we talk about people of faith, as you're talking about here, right, from a biblical standpoint, saturating our minds with God's word. Why is that important, and how will that close the gap? Well, one of the biggest challenges that we have is forgetting.
mm.
Don't forget to remember, right? We need to remember. But that's one of the biggest challenges, because the battle is in the mind. And that's why the apostle Paul would say, set your mind on things above, not on things below.
Mm,
So where we put our mind, that's often where the battle is. So if our mind is constantly being filled with worry induced news or social media, which adds to what are other people going to say about me? How do I measure up? All these other kind of things, then we feel like we are going to lose some of that, maybe access or closeness. Um, so number one, I would encourage individuals to fill their minds with the Word of God. We think about meditation. The Bible speaks about meditation
mhm.
in Philippians chapter 4 and verse number 8. It's not necessarily emptying our minds, but it's rather filling our minds with God's word. Whatever things are good or true or noble or right, Paul says, and it's interesting because in that context in Philippians 4 earlier, he says, be anxious for nothing.
Hmm.
Then he talks about praying. And I heard this great acronym by this one author, CALM, CALM, which comes from Philippians 4, verses 4 through 8, where in verse 4, he says, rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. So, number one, celebrate. When we celebrate and understand who we are in Christ and with God, then that automatically eliminates a lot of concerns and worries and brings us closer. A stands for ask. We are to make our petitions known to him. We have friends that will say, call us anytime. If you ever need something, call us anytime. Except if it's like 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. in the morning, right? Or from vacation or sabbatical. But any other time, call me. I'm here for you. Well, our Heavenly Father, he actually means that.
Yes, anytime, all the time.
Anytime, all the time. The L in the acronym CALM stands for leave. Once we ask and cast our cares to him, that's the idea of catch and release. Leave them there. Don't pull them back.
Mm,
So leave those things with the one who is way bigger than we are, and can actually give us what we need. And then the M stands for meditate. CALM, celebrate, ask, leave, meditate. And so all of those are going to help us with having this access. And obviously, what I teach and preach with the gospel and believing and obeying the gospel in Jesus Christ. Obviously, that's something that's a big component of it as well, or the big component of it, having a relationship with Him. It was interesting in the book, The Stress Prescription. There's science now or studies going on about the power of awe,
mm,
AWE. And that struck me because Cole, typically, I'm looking at things from a biblical perspective. And when I heard that, just how important that is, having a sense of awe. If you go to like Yosemite, we feel that where we look at like, man, this is unbelievable. Or Mount St. Helens that I got to visit in 2021. Well, that's actually already in the Bible.
mm.
Having this sense of awe, of worship and adoration for God. But all of these things, people are now seeing how important they really are with decreasing stress and
Yeah.
decreasing worry. And so all these answers, I believe, have been given to us. But um, the Word of God, saturating our minds with it, listening to it, meditating upon it. It's the idea of just kind of chewing on it, pondering it. So
Mhm.
many great passages with family, and that's one of the things that we try to do with having a short devotional. It doesn't have to be an hour, 2 hours, but just a thought or a passage. Prayer is something that I advocate and something that I'm personally doing, to help me with my worry as well. And then just looking at what's helped me out, Cole, is just looking at God. He's got the perfect resume. He's got the perfect resume. And he tells us, check out my resume. Go back and check all the promises that I've made. Yeah, go back and check. Have I dropped the ball ever? I
Mm.
drop the ball all the time. I had to reschedule with you and I had you on my show for the podcast. I say one thing, okay, now I got to move this around. We drop the ball with our families. We disappoint our kids, right? We don't keep our commitments at time. But God, he says, well, no, check out my resume. Look at what I've done and look at what I've said I'll do. And so that's where that trust component definitely comes in. And I think that will help bridge the gap where we do feel closer to him, because the reality is, if it is just like on once a week, where we go together to worship, and that's certainly important, and we should do that, man. That's, imagine if you only ate one meal per week. Imagine if you only worked out 1 out of 7 days. Imagine if we only spent time with our children 1 day out of the entire week.
Yeah.
And so we have to make that time for the Lord, that personal time. That's one of the things when I think about habits and rituals. Jesus, when he was on earth, it says in Mark 1:35, and I love this, that he would wake up early in the morning and go to a place of solitude to pray. And so he had his own little habits
His
as well.
own morning routine.
He had his own morning routine. That's right. He woke up early in the morning. So, but think about that. I mean, we all crave these routines and rituals. And yeah, I love reading books. I've mentioned a number of books, but you have so many examples of this, in the scriptures that will give us a lot of guidance.
Yeah. So cool. And thanks so much for sharing like the, 5 or 6 steps that you mentioned that can really help navigate worry more effectively. Because I think, the mind is 5 times more likely to spend time on quote unquote negative material. And it takes some intention to start to flip the way the brain wants to kind of live there and spend time there. And so each of these, it's like, try all of them. Try
Yeah, that's exactly right.
catch and release, spray, like do all the things because they all, can be ways to help guide the system, guide the spirit, guide the body, guide the mind toward a
Mm.
different way of navigating day to day where, and it's so funny because I think for any person, when you try to flip the way you're used to being, if you're trying to flip out of worry, right? It's like it's not going to be a week from now that you're like, "Oh, look at
Yeah,
all my worries are gone."
yeah.
Right? It's going to be a slow and steady way of shifting and now
Mhm.
maybe the mind has more space or maybe it has some different things it gets to think about or maybe it has different conversations you get to have with people you love and care about and to just have some patience alongside of it
Mhm.
as
Yeah,
well.
absolutely. Well, I just thought of something, if I can share it, and just thinking about, I know your passion with family, and I really appreciate that. I really love that there's so much focus on the family for you. And I think that's so important, because our families, time in life is short. And that time that we have with family. The first thing though, um, TAG, time
Okay.
alone with God.
Mm.
That was something that I did a sermon on that. That's what we see with Jesus. So we could put that into our daily calendars. Hey, did you tag today?
Mm. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And so that time alone could be in prayer. It could be in scripture reading. It could be in singing songs. It could be in meditation. It could be in a lot of different ways, but look for ways and make sure that we tag every day. The second thought, though, and is with our children. Growing up, or the school systems probably aren't helping us with how to navigate worry.
Hmm.
We learn about math, science, health, politics, so many other, geography, history, but how do we handle worry? And there are so many young children who are struggling with this now. So that would be something I would encourage us as parents. How do, we're teaching our children something about worry
Hmm.
just by the way we live. So even if we don't say a word, we're showing them, oh, this is how you respond when you get stressed.
Yeah.
This is how you act when you feel overwhelmed. So there's an opportunity for us to sit down and say, hey, what's on your mind? I love, like, when we were talking, your questions at the dinner table. Were you worried about anything today?
Hmm.
Let's talk about that. Maybe we can unpack that a little bit. So that's another way that not only for us, but that probably will help us as we're teaching our children, because we want to help them to avoid being consumed with it as well.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's a really beautiful place for us to close because that's such a, yeah. I'm always looking like what are the power moves we get to make as
Mm,
parents? And I don't mean like from a like
yeah.
gaining some kind of status power move. I just mean like what are the ways where we really get to show up in a meaningful and intentional way, right? And I don't think there's much more powerful way than what we model, right? To your point about like what are our children seeing happens and get to be the choices we make when things feel hard or we're worried about something, right? Gosh, we saw that like crazy during the pandemic, and that was,
Yep.
yeah, there was a lot of opportunity there, and the opportunities continue. So Benjamin, share a little bit, like where can people find out more about you and the work that you're doing and all of the good stuff that you're up to?
Yeah. Thank you, Cole, for having me on the show. Really appreciate you. People can go to benjaminlee.blog, and you can find obviously my blog, where I'm at on social media and Instagram and Facebook and all the other social media platforms as well. And the people can reach out to me there via email. I have a podcast, the I Can Do podcast, with Benjamin Lee. And so love for people to check that out as well. And all of that's available at benjaminlee.blog.
Beautiful. And we'll make sure to share that in the show notes so people can hop right on over. So
Thank you.
awesome. Thank you so much. I'm really grateful to be able to kind of dive into just this a topic that I think is super pervasive, but can be a little bit challenging or scary to talk about. And so I just really appreciate the insight that you shared and giving our listeners a chance to even just ask, what is the thing that you're worried about? What do you spend your time worrying about? And how might you just take that one little action that starts to shift that experience for you? So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Cole.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much for listening, and we will catch you again next time.